Welcome to the Original Gangsters podcast. I'm your host, Scott Burnstein. Quick hitter edition. We're going to go up to Montreal and give an update on the craziness that's going on in the Canadian underworld. We're always updating you with the Great White North chaos. And there's been a lot of information to come out in court filings the last week or two. Shout out to Journal de Montreal, who broke a lot of this news in just in French Canadian or in the French speaking press. There's really been nothing in the English speaking press on this. So some of this I'm going to break down for you. And then we're going to talk at the very end about a small housekeeping note that also has been under the radar and involves a major player in the Rizzuto mob. So what we learned from some of these court filings is that we learned who the alleged hit team was that killed Smiling Joe Di Maulo, who was murdered just weeks after Vito Rizzuto landed back in Montreal after spending 8 years in prison, the last 4 of which took place in the United States. We all know that when he left Canada to go serve his time in the U.S., the entire Rizzuto mob empire came under fire, and there was an insurgence that it looks like Di Maulo was a part of. Vito Rizzuto had tasked Joe Di Maulo with being the acting boss. I guess he had been underboss to Vito at some point before Vito left, and he was basically put in charge of minding the store when Vito was gone. And instead of looking after things and making sure Vito and his family and the Rizzuto mob's best interests were being served, he joined the insurgents with his brother-in-law, Renaud Desjardins, who was kind of the de facto underboss, even though he was French-Canadian. It looks like Di Maulo, we're learning now, Di Maulo was the official underboss, and then I guess official street boss for when Vito was gone. And Vito lost his father, his son, and his brother-in-law to the warfare. And naturally, he blamed Di Maulo, Desjardins, and he wanted retribution. So Vito Rizzuto gets back in October of 2012, and within, I believe, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, Joe Di Maulo is murdered in his front yard. And we've learned who the hit team was, allegedly, and then we learned some very interesting facts about the days leading up to Di Maulo's assassination. So it came out that the relationship, obviously, between Di Maulo and Rizzuto was incredibly frayed. Naturally, Di Maulo was a guy that went all the way back before the Rizzutos. He was a major player back in the 60s, and very, very well respected. They called him Smiling Joe because he was kind of a natural gangland politician. And according to these court filings, he went to Vito Rizzuto's mansion uninvited and begged for his life about 48 hours before he was murdered. That is pretty riveting to learn that he wasn't asked to come over there. He just showed up and knocked on the door. And then there was also, according to Di Maulo's family, there was a verbal altercation, a telephone call that went off the rails before Di Maulo showed up uninvited at Rizzuto's mansion, where they were screaming at each other, and Di Maulo was blaming everything on Desjardins and telling Vito, what was I supposed to do? He's my brother-in-law. We're told this did not come from the court filings or Journal de Montreal. We're told from some of our sourcing that Vito Rizzuto's response when they met face-to-face was, what do you mean what you were supposed to do? You should have killed your brother-in-law. And I don't care if you made your sister a widow, your loyalty should have been to us. And then, within, again, 48 hours of that fateful meeting at the Rizzuto mansion, Di Maulo was gunned down in his front yard. And we're learning that the hit team was made up of Sal Scapa, and Tonino Coloccia, who goes by the nickname, or went by the nickname, Tony Boots. 2 years later, Tony Boots was killed, and a guy that is a major player right now, was less of a player back then, was almost killed alongside Tony Boots. And we're talking about Eastside Marco Pisi, who's a skipper and runs the east side of Montreal for the Rizzuto mob. And we're told is having some kind of newfound authority recently, helping with some of the day-to-day operations in the Rizzuto crime family. And Marco Pisi, based on what we see in these court filings, if it wasn't for fate intervening, would have been killed with Tony Boots, who was a cousin of Marco Pisi's and a close friend, an older cousin. So they went to lunch together on December 1st, 2014. It was exactly 10 years ago this week. And they went to a restaurant, a gastropub called Bistro Exo Plus, and they were having a meal. And Marco Pisi had to go to the bathroom, had to drain the main vein, and went to the bathroom, was using the urinal, and he heard gunshots. And he came out of the bathroom and found his cousin sprawled on the ground, dead. And he averted assassination himself. And it's coming out now in these court filings that the hit team consisted again of Sal Scapa, and at this point, Tony Boots was the target. He was no longer with Sal in the hit team. Tony Boots was replaced by a street gang boss named Bien Montpont, who would be killed himself in subsequent years, and the leader of the Unit 44 gang. And Sal Scapa would go from hitter for the Rizzutos to street boss of the Rizzutos to a target himself. And he was murdered. And he was murdered in a very brazen, audacious style at a hotel at a Sheraton during a wedding in Laval. But so this is all coming out in the last week or two. We wanted to update you. Montpont would be killed in 2021 for trying to kill members of the Rizzutos. And right now, the underboss of the Rizzutos, Little Sauce Solicito, is allegedly being investigated for ordering Montpont's murder in 21. I know there's a lot of names and a lot of machinations here to keep straight. You need a scorecard, and I'm trying to help you guys out. It's hard for me to take it all in and wrap my brain around it. So I can imagine it's hard for you, but I'm trying to do the best I can to make these kind of digestible pieces of information. So I would say that the big takeaway here was that Joe Di Maulo, who is not somebody to bend the knee often, went and got on his knees and pleaded for his life with Vito Rizzuto, and Rizzuto was having none of it. And Marco Pisi is lucky to be alive now in 2024. 10 years ago this week, he could have easily been dead. And I think the final thing I want to get into just really quickly to clear up some rumors and some speculation. Street boss of the Rizzuto Mafia, Baldi Barbario, is facing a case in Ontario, but we want to be very clear, has not left Montreal. He is still in Montreal. He's got his case in Ontario. Not a lot of people know about that. It's been kept under wraps, but he's got a case in Ontario. His next hearing is in January. He had a hearing that was supposed to be last week, but it was pushed off because of some health issues with his attorney. But there had been rumors floating around this last year that Barberio had left Montreal, and that is false. David Baldy Barberio is a staunch Rizzuto loyalist and is still in Montreal calling shots as the street boss of the Rizzuto mob and fighting a case in Ontario. So we just wanted to clear all that up. That's our update for what's going on with the Rizzuto mob. And this really had nothing to do with the Hells Angels and the war that they're fighting against them. This is more kind of internal housekeeping within the Rizzuto mob we wanted to catch you up on. So please like, share, and subscribe. Spread the word about OG Pod. Original Gangsters podcast, uncovering the underworld, one city, one region, one country at a time. I'm Scott Burnstein. I'm out.